The economy is a top priority on the minds of voters going into the 2016 elections. Though there is some division, a majority of voters appear to have the impression that Donald Trump would be better for the economy than Hillary Clinton. Trump has pledged to continue the tax cuts for the wealthy that have characterized Republican fiscal policy for the past 4 decades. Much of this policy has been directed by Grover Norquist, who has pressured Republicans running for federal election to sign a pledge to only cut taxes and not to raise them. However, there's no corresponding pledge regarding federal spending, and federal spending levels have largely been unrelated to levels of government revenue from taxes. Consequently, after tax cuts, more of the government's activities have been debt financed. This chart shows the yearly federal budget deficit as a percentage of GDP. I've put the Republican administrations in red, from Carter's last budget in 1981 to George H.W.'s last budget in 1993, and then from Clinton's last budget in 2001 to George W. Bush's last budget in 2009. You can see that during the periods immediately following both the Reagan tax cuts and the George W. Bush tax cuts, the federal deficit increased dramatically, and that the increase started with the first budget of each president's administration, 1982 for Reagan and 2002 for George W. Bush. George H.W. Bush famously went back on his pledge, and the deficit was relatively under control during his 4-year term. You can also see that over the past 4 decades, the federal deficit has decreased dramatically twice, during the Clinton administration and during the Obama administration. So the record clearly shows Republicans have traded taxes for deficits, and Democrats have done the reverse. To what degree does this trade-off have economic merit? Interestingly, a 1996 survey asked economists to rate the impact of taxes upon the economy, and also asked them to rate the impact of the federal deficit upon the economy. In the survey, 0 is not a reason at all, 1 is a minor reason, and 2 is a major reason. The survey showed that while the average person thought that taxes were a bigger influence on the economy than the federal deficit, economists only rated the importance of taxes at 0.78. They rated the importance of the federal deficit at 1.13, which indicates that economists feel that a higher federal deficit has a substantially larger negative influence upon the economy than higher taxes. Indeed, 2 Princeton economists recently found that for all the deficits that have been run up under Republican presidents, real GDP has grown about 1.8 times faster under Democratic presidents. The Republican policy of cutting taxes to increase the federal deficit may not have economic merit, but it has political value. Most voters are not economists. They get happy about the idea of tax cuts and don't consider the broader consequences of such cuts. On the other hand, cutting expenses does not score political points. Most voters are indifferent to expense cuts unless the expenditures to them are cut, in which case they get unhappy. This is why there is no corresponding expense pledge that is enforced by Grover Norquist. This is why, when Republicans have been in power, taxes have gone down, but government expenses have not, and why Republican policy has led to an increasing federal deficit, while Democratic policy has led to a reduction in the federal deficit. This is a political niche that Republicans have carved out for themselves over the past 4 decades, which is what Dick Cheney was referring to when he famously said, "Reagan proved deficits don't matter." Donald Trump has pledged to carry on the same Republican ploy that has been politically successful but not economically successful over the past 4 decades. Cut taxes, especially for the wealthy. The Economist has projected that Donald Trump's fiscal plans might put the U.S. national debt above 100% of GDP by 2024, compared to about 80% for Clinton, which is close to the current level. If the debt gets too high, increasing monetization of it may ultimately lead to inflation. Donald Trump has less to worry about inflation than most Americans, since most of Trump's wealth is in real estate, and real estate tends to do better than most assets in an inflationary environment.